Welcome to The Independent Artist, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists, NAIA. I'm Douglas Sigworth. I'm a glassblower.
I'm Will Armstrong, mixed media artist. Join us as we explore the topics that affect the lives and livelihood of art show artists.
Hey, Will.
Douglas, it's nice to see you here on Zoom and talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Well, I called you up a couple weeks ago and I said, do you have any experience with a podcast? And, we started talking about this project and we've kind of run with it, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. You've been a member of the NAIA board for about 2-3 weeks?
It feels like a whole year, though. I mean,
well, you've done more work in like 2 or 3 weeks than a lot of us have in a year. But I appreciate you bringing the idea of the newsletter back into this idea of a podcast. It's pretty exciting.
It's been quite a year. I mean, it's been a full year since the show's shut down, and we've all kind of been off in our separate camps. Just kind of isolated from being out on the road.
Isolated, trying to figure out what to do with our time to not drive our spouses insane, but I never would have dreamed that my pro panels would now be used as a sound booth instead of an actual art booth.
Well, I've got a big box set up around my desk in the kitchen with parts from my old trim line with moving blankets clamped all around it, so it's like I'm in a cave.
It's good. I'm sure your wife appreciates your interior design sense with your moving blankets hanging in the kitchen.
Yeah. She's super cool about it. So, what were you doing last year in January and February leading up to it? Were you doing any Florida shows?
I did. I always try to do one burner show. I always call it a burner because it's been like 3 or 4 months since I've talked to a human or tried to sell any of my work. Right. So I try to do a show that I think I'm probably going to bomb at anyway. And I did not do that last year. I did not have a Florida show that I assumed was going to be terrible. I just started right in at Gasparilla, and okay. I normally do well at Gasparilla. I kind of tanked it because I didn't know how to talk to people. And I was like, that's all right. I'll use Gasparilla as my burner and then get back to work once the rest of the season started. Little did I know.
Right. Well, how long of a break did you have before Gasparilla I know you said it was going to be like your launch.
Yeah, I do that one-of-a-kind show in Chicago. I'm one of the...
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I've always been able to make that one work. I've done it for years and years, and I always love that kind of holiday feel. I know I'm a rarity as far as some of my peers go, as far as how they feel about that one, but,
I did that show back when it first started. I did it for the first... Everything seems like 10 years, but I did it for the first 10 years of the show until it didn't work anymore for me.
So back when you... like the second floor, and you could see it from, that was awesome. And I still do really well there, and I love the people that run it, but I know it doesn't work for some, but it really works for me and a bunch of other folks. But
great.
Anyway, so December, I actually got really sick right after that. I picked up something there that kind of wondering if it was, I know that's too early for COVID, but I got just laid low, temperature of 105, pneumonia, couldn't get off the couch, and was that way through Christmas Day, really.
Jeez. So that does make you wonder. I mean, our last show before everything shut down was Naples National at Cambier Park, and our booth neighbor was coughing and hacking and sick the whole weekend. I was just wondering, was that the virus? Honestly, COVID wasn't on my radar at that point. We got these tiny little hand sanitizers in our packet, and I thought to myself, what are we ever going to use these for? I don't know if I was just living in a bubble or if it really did all kind of just explode the first week of March. I don't know.
The crazy thing, my wife and I we always try to cash in our points, hotel points and flight points at the end of the year, and we'll go to Mexico and just sit on a beach. So we're sitting on the beach when everything is kind of going down, and it seems like the world is on fire, and you couldn't buy hand sanitizer in America, right. And they were saying toilet paper was running out. We're like, get me another pina colada, please, because I'm not going back to the States. But we ended up buying hand sanitizer. They weren't worried in Mexico at that point, and we bought 3 or 4 things that we kept for that first couple of months. That's where we got it. We got it in an airport in Cozumel.
So this was a trip after you did Gasparilla, and did you have anything lined up after Gasparilla?
Oh, yeah, everything. I mean, everything went down.
Like Winter Park?
I had Winter Park. I had Fort Worth was trying to decide whether or not they were going to go. They were trying to push it to September. And I remember at the time just looking, everything was falling, and I was just going, no, wait. You know, it's too early. Don't do it.
Yeah, we all had the thought they were overreacting.
Oh, yeah, big time. And now I'm going through 2021 and thinking they're overreacting again. I've taken it very, very seriously. I'm super masked. I'm panicked about trying to get the vaccine. Here in New Mexico, it's a lot harder to get that vaccine if you are not in that. They're doing an incredible job of getting everyone vaccinated in the stages. You know, once they open it up to healthcare workers, then they go down to, the old folks' homes. And, I'm 50, so they have not opened it up to me yet.
Yeah, I'm 52.
Yeah.
50 as well.
Yeah, don't add years on yourself.
No, not going to happen. Yeah, well, we had flown home like a lot of artists do for Florida season after Naples National. And we had a couple weeks off and we're going back for Winter Park. It was crazy. I think it was a Wednesday. We had gotten emails from Bayou City and emails from Winter Park saying, "Don't worry, we're going on. We're going to be taking protocols, and you're good." So that comes out, and then the next day there were cancellation emails coming through.
Right.
And we were thinking, we have to fly back to Florida just to drive our van and trailer all the way home to Wisconsin.
I did the exact same thing, Douglas. I left my truck and trailer in long-term storage in Orlando, getting ready for Winter Park, and we went to Mexico instead. And we flew home, and I'm like, oh my God, just the drive of shame to go down, fly down just to get your truck and drive home, drive it back to Virginia at that time.
Do you remember having that fear that maybe they'll close the borders, or maybe hotels won't even be taking people to stay? Are we going to have to drive this all in one shot?
Yeah, absolutely. Do I want to, do I even want to, is it safe to go into a hotel? I was buying gasoline and, just at the pump and hitting fast food through the drive-through, which I normally wouldn't do, and then peeing in a cup. And dumping it out the window. And my wife is like, "How did you go into the bathroom?" I'm like, "You don't want to talk about it."
I normally bring the wipes, the bleach wipes into hotel rooms and wipe down, light switches and and the TV remotes and everything. But I did that on turbo drive. I was wiping down the baseboard of the bed and all the surfaces down. We were totally treating it like, we were taking our lives into our hands.
Yeah, that's the way it felt. Because you didn't know at that time how long it stayed in the air. They thought it was a contact disease. Pick it up on the counter and put it in your mouth, touch your mouth, all of this stuff. And now they're finding out it's more airborne. And I don't know. It's been a terrifying time.
Everybody's been worried. Different stages of worry, and everyone has members of their family or themselves that they're worried about. For us personally, our son is 20, but he was diagnosed at 6 years old with juvenile diabetes. And so, we have always had that chronic health disease to deal with. But more than that, we've actually had a handful of really close calls where he could have died, he could have had organ damage and stuff. So the reality to us that bad things can happen to you was real.
That's terrifying.
So we did not just brush it off like, our family lived in a bubble. And our 23-year-old daughter, who is out of college and working in a job, it's rough for someone of that age to then have to stay, they want to have a social life. They want to be with their friends.
Right.
And we had to treat our house like we were quarantined from the world.
Absolutely. We're just now getting out and meeting some neighbors. We actually had a huge move all the way from Richmond, Virginia, where I've lived my entire life, out to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where we're living now. And we had committed to that early on, and my ex bought property out here. She had committed to that, and that was before, we had even had the weight of all of the virus. She bought that property early in the year. She's like, well, I'm stuck. You guys better figure it out. So it was really hard to try to finish out that move. Get a loan during all of that too. And we're like, you're self-employed and you haven't worked since last February. It just has been, it's been really challenging. And moving our 2 kids out here too has been, going, you're going to leave all of your friends behind and move to a place where you can't even meet people.
Right.
It's just been really challenging. But at least we're not dealing with a possibly life-threatening, or with a very much life-threatening illness like you are.
I can see the struggles. It's just an example of the struggles everyone around the country and the world are dealing with. It's so unique and tailor-made. I mean, life goes on and you got yourself, committed to life change, and you can't just not do it. You know what I mean? You have to move forward and find your way through it. So,
it's been a crazy year. How have you made it through? How did you end up selling? And were you a virtual guy? Were you a gallery guy? How did it work for you?
Yeah, the first step once we got back from Florida was, my dad is a financial advisor. That was his career. He helped people with investments and did taxes. And he had retired, 6 months previous. And I got back and he called me up right away. And this was when the SBA and the CARES Act was just talking about programs that they were going to be initiating. And he said, listen, Doug, I don't know what's going to happen here, and I don't really have the time and the ability to figure it all out, but I want you to get started, get in line for this SBA funding, because I don't want you, like everyone, showing up at Costco looking for toilet paper and the shelves are bare. I want you to get in line for all this aid. So I put all of my focus into learning about it, and got online and shared it with other artists. And so I did it all. We got the pandemic unemployment. We got the PPP. We got the EIDL loans. We got the grants. I've been on top of everything all along the way. So that was kind of getting that in place. Then shortly after is when we were, we needed some time. I think the country needed some time to kind of deal with where they were going to be going with this. Well, then, beginning of summer, we started getting emails and some calls from collectors. It was touching, and it was like giving us hope that, well, maybe they are out there.
Yeah.
So that's when I spent all my time in figuring out how to reach my mailing list on the website, and I really worked the website. And we've had decent return on the website with marketing and sales and whatever. So we've gotten through that way. How about you? What have you been doing to keep afloat?
I jumped in immediately and tried to start keeping the wheels on just by selling things and reaching out. I worked leads that I've got a little book of leads, these different people that, they were on the fence, they were B-backs, and I collected their information, and I started kind of going back and dealing with them individually. I did do the PPP loan, so I got some of the federal money, but then quickly I just kind of got back to work. I've had incredible clients along the way. One in particular that she literally just sent me $1,000. It said, I want something from you. Here's this. I know you must be struggling. And that these little things like that they keep the wheels on and they keep you working. I did a few things along the way that maybe I would do differently, but things that I'd wanted to do, like I did a line of T-shirts that I thought were fun. They quickly became not fun. I made some mistakes and realized why a lot of us don't do that. My buddy Matt Hemminghouse has a line that he screens and runs himself, and he'd take around to shows and sell, just be like, hey, I want a green and this, and be like, nope, here's a red. And be like, well, gosh, I really kind of wanted a green shirt, but I got this red one, but I love the red, but And then I realized quickly why. I mean, it's like,
This is why, yeah.
oh, it was such a pain. I hated it. I loved it, and then I hated it. But I'd had all these little sketches that I'd do, and I was like, that'd make a cool shirt. And I just had a pile of them. So I ran them all off, and man, I will not do that again. I did a couple things along the way, like when things would be particularly tight, I'd run a little sale, or I'd do this, and quickly, once I started putting the energy back into my business, it would start picking back up again. But I've been able to take on, one of those leads was a huge commission that I got from this incredible client, and he and I had been talking about a major piece for his wall, and I did the biggest piece I've ever done.
Cool.
While I was trying to figure out how to buy a house in Santa Fe. And so I was working out of a barn, an uninsulated barn in October in Minnesota. And my family up there was saying, you might want to hurry it along because winter is coming. And I was like, well, this is whatever, it's fine. I finished that painting with frozen paint in my hand. I was like, why isn't my paint flowing? I was like, I can't get to the flow. And I look at it, I'm like, that is not drying. That is freezing in my hand. So I was dealing with -9, snow on the ground, trudging back and forth. I mean, it was a challenge, but we got it done, and I finished and had that piece installed. But the whole thing ended up being, I think, the biggest piece I'd ever done. Before that was 6 feet tall and 9 feet wide, which is pretty impressive. This piece was 20 feet tall by, 9 feet tall by 18 feet wide.
Cool.
So, I mean, it was essentially a mural. But
one thing we had going for us for funding for this year was 2019 was our blowout year. We had a decent year for art shows. But then we did a large installation for the lobby of a building. It filled, 60 feet by about 20 feet.
Incredible.
So that big boom, we were thinking, okay, that's going to really, lead to great stuff into 2020. But, like as is the nature with our business, after you finish something like that, you basically start back from scratch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you
trying
really
to get
do.
something like that. But because we had that really good project on the books, and what all of this funding got based on was our 2019 tax returns, it really helped us. A lot of us are, our tax returns are showing that we've reinvested into our business, and we show maybe very little profit. And so there's a lot of artists like us who really have struggled this year, because when they did create these programs to help, it's showing, well, you don't make that much, so you don't get that much. And that's been it's led people to do side hustles and do whatever they can do just to keep afloat.
Yeah, I found I really don't have very many galleries that I've worked with, but the 3 that I do have done pretty well, and I just doubled down on them. One is owned by an art show artist as well, and so I've got a great relationship with him. He's always always let me kind of put things in the gallery, and then if I have a show, yank them all back out. But this time I'm like, we're just focusing on you. I'm focusing on your gallery. I'm focusing on another one that I've got in Utah that sells my work. And I mean, I've been really lucky with them. My income is down about, it's still down about 60%, but that 40%, keeping that is enough to keep it on, I think a lot of art show artists are probably going to realize how expensive shows are, and all of the expenses that we put into them, and how if they've been able to survive. My wife is an art show artist, and she's like, I don't know how many shows I'm going to do when this all comes back to normal, because I kind of like working from home and doing these projects. So I know she'll do shows, but I think she's going to cut it way down, and I wonder how many other artists have realized that they don't want to travel maybe as much as they were. I mean, I'm chomping at the bit to get back on the road, but I know it's the opposite side of the coin for her. She's like, well, I kind of like home.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a whole new ballgame, because we've gotten used to which run of shows we do. We'll go to A, B, C, and then come home or something like that. You know what I mean? And then now with everything being kind of like allocated to a new time slot in the fall.
Oh, yeah, we're just going to do everything in September. I got 17 shows lined up for those 4 weekends.
You know, that's a good point that I wanted to address. You know, there are so many of us that have a dream schedule for the fall, and we can kind of sit back and really, you know, say, okay, well, I have my pick.
Right.
But there are a lot of us who, for whatever reason, just how the mapping went, they're shut out of shows for the fall, and they don't have anything. So it is kind of hard when they hear online artists saying, "Oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do all of my shows," and they're like, "Well, throw me a bone," you know?
Right.
Because
yeah, I've got a friend here in Santa Fe that she was going to take 2020 off. She was like, "Well, I'm going to take 2020 off from shows," and that's all well and good. But she wanted to get back to work in 2021. And she can't apply for anything. All of her entire thing has been rolled over. And now we're rolling over twice. Some shows aren't happening. Shows that I thought I might be able to get in with a low number off the wait list, I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm still holding out to that, but then that's rolled over 2 times. And I'm like, well, where is that even going to be? I don't know.
I'm finding myself frustrated. You know, there are shows that I applied to trying to build a schedule for the fall. And I applied, I sent in my money. Application fees, I've noticed this coming year, are bumping up as well. And then after the fact, I realized, oh, they've already rolled over, you know, 175 of their 200 artists.
Right.
And so not only am I throwing in a more expensive application fee than I would normally do, my chances have gone down dramatically.
Of course. And a lot of these shows count on our applications. And some of them have not been entirely forthcoming on the fact that you're applying for the wait list, or you're applying for, instead of a 1 chance in 200, you're applying for a 1 chance in 60, because those are the people that bowed out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a mess. Like I have this whole, and it's not, I'd like to call it a spreadsheet, but it's a pile of crap on my desk that is like, okay, I paid for dogwood.
How is that remotely a spreadsheet?
Oh, it's not at all. It's not, because I spread it out look at it. I'm like, okay, this show is rolling over. This show hasn't decided. This show is doing this. They're not inviting wait lists. We're not rolling over wait lists. They are rolling over these guys. And I'm like, okay, did I pay? Did I not pay? And how many panicked emails are shows answering every day? I'm like, oh, I can't remember if I did this or did that. Is this rolling over? Do I still get my booth? What's the show look like? I mean, I know for Winter Park, that's my first show again this year. You know, I was like, okay, I'm in booth 54, and then you look at the map, and it's like, well, they only go up to 50, so 54 doesn't exist, so I'm not sure that, and then you have to reapply for your booth space, and you're not sure where you're going to get, and you don't know if you want to. I don't know. It's a disaster. It's hard.
Yeah, we're in Winter Park too, and I don't know if you saw this, but with the new layout, they spread the booths out, and it's a brand new setup. So we're going to be reallocated to new locations, and
yeah, I did see that, and to be honest, I mean, with the exception of shows being harder to get into, more space is dreamy. You know,
As a glass artist, I love to be able to open things up, because, you know, you walk into a glass booth and suddenly people feel like, where are my elbows? Where are my hands? Am I going to back into a display? So my rule of thumb is always keep it as open so they have an entrance and exit escape route, because they'll stay and look more than feeling like they're trapped.
Right. I've had that ever since I talked to my own personal art show Yoda, Daryl Thetford. He was like, don't let them get pinned in, you know, give them an exit. Don't make them feel trapped. He's a great guy to go to for advice. We should probably have him on here at some point.
Absolutely.
That would be a killer conversation. Dibs. I got dibs.
You got him tagging. Yeah, right. Somebody walks into this inline booth, 3-wall size, and then you come from outside the street and you walk up to them and greet them, and now they really feel penned in. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm trapped. I can't go anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, but I do a dance. I do 2D. I give myself an escape route because I don't want to be penned in there with them too. And it's going to be especially important these days with not wanting, I don't want the huddled masses breathing on me.
Well, one thing I'm looking forward to in this podcast is, we're going to have conversations with lots of different artists, and we're going to talk to people who've gotten back on the road with the masks and how they set up and how they manage a show like the olden days, but with new kind of standards and new kind of precautions. And then, some of the people like your wife who are like, well, I'm actually happy at home and I'm going to try and figure out how to run my business back in my studio and appeal to the mailing list I already have had.
Right. And she'll remain happy at home as long as we don't pull her onto the podcast. That's going to be a big fat no. She's already told me, she's like, I am not talking to you on that podcast.
But, Renee's the same way. I think our wives will listen while they work in the studio or ride in the car, but yeah, they're going to give us our space, I think.
Absolutely.
On this one.
You go do your little project, honey. So yeah, we have lots of ideas. I had never met you at an art show. Odds are that we would have met, if we join on Facebook. I say we've got like 60 friends in common or something, but I'd never met you.
I know.
Really nice to meet you through here, and nice to hear that we've got a rapport, and I'm excited about the different things we're going to approach.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And we both started doing road shows at about the same time. And it was 2002 or so. I mean, that's,
right.
We're looking at almost 20 years out there. And we are in and out of the same shows, but we've never been booth neighbors. And isn't it crazy how you get assigned next to somebody and that, 12 to 20 hours next to somebody at a show, same experience, you make friendships for life that way.
Yeah, it's almost like being in an office and sharing a cubicle.
Yeah.
You're in that same little area, and we lifelong friends, and some people you want to avoid lifelong. It depends on how the weekend goes.
I have experience being next to somebody who either isn't jiving on us or we're not jiving on them, and that...
Oh, yeah.
That side of the tent isn't far enough away.
You're like, wow, we had 2 feet of storage here, and you seem to have taken it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, it's a challenging life, and we're going to approach a lot of those challenges and talk to some really interesting people. I'm excited about this project, Douglas.
Yeah, me too. And some of the other interviews that we have planned coming up are with other board members, past and present. So we can open up that line of communication and talk about what has been done and what we're doing now. But most importantly, so we can serve as a point of contact with you. So please let us know what's going on out there so that we can be more effective.
Absolutely. And if you wanted to join NAIA, the National Association of Independent Artists, all you have to do is go to naiaartists.org, and there's a quick way to just click on join us, and you can either be a show, an event, or an individual, and it's really easy. If you feel like donating, it's very easy, but you can join for free, and we only have strength in numbers, so think about joining NAIA and kind of lending your voice.
There are strength in numbers. And by adding your name to the list of members, our organization will grow, and we show a united front. Now, there is an option to become an annual or monthly financial contributor, but with the economic struggles out there, all the fees are waived. We don't want there to be any kind of deterrent from joining. So, if you can contribute, please do. It does take some money to run this nonprofit and to fund advocacy on behalf of the artist community, but it is by no means required. Now, some of the projects this organization has tackled in the past include setting up a unified show application process back when we applied for shows using slides, the conversion from paper applications to a digital application process through Zap and Juried Art Services, rooting out buy-sell at shows, and most recently here, working with art shows to create a refund or rollover policy regarding the cancellations due to COVID?
I used to do a radio show. The call letters were WRIR, and I didn't think anything could be more awkward to roll off the tongue than WRIR, but now we've got NAIA.
I've heard you refer to it as NAIA.
I have.
Is that what other people use too? Because I haven't heard that.
I've heard Carol Swayze say NAIA before.
Okay.
And if Carol says it, then I think we can say it.
I agree. And it kind of rolls off the tongue a little easier, doesn't it, NAIA?
A lot easier than NAIA. And I can only not say it I think I have to say it in a robot voice in order to get it out without kind of slurring it together. NAIA. It's too much.
Here's a clip from our next episode, Understanding the Digital Marketplace, with our guest, Marjolijn van der Hart.
The show actually gives lead generation. That's what it is. They give a qualified buyer. And we have the digital tools now to do that. We can build the infrastructure around us that is how we make one-of-a-kind type of pieces.
Now you're not going to waste your time.
Yeah, we can just set up in a closet. The same thing.
Well, I've thought about it.
There you go. I have a show in my closet. Might as well.
So will you say that you were in radio for 15 years?
Yeah, it was all volunteer radio, but I did about 15 years of it and finally gave it up. It was a really nice solace for me when I was going through some kind of hard times and needed to have a room where I could just play my own records and turn them up really loud and play for people. Mm-hmm. I've always been cocky with my music collection.
Yeah.
Felt like, what I had going on was better than what somebody else might have going on, so I took that to the radio airwaves.
Some people call that being a music snob there, Will.
Oh, yeah. I'm guilty as charged, for sure. But yeah, the first couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years, I did college radio. I had a buddy of mine come to a party, and he and I got to talking about radio, and he was doing sound and lighting for film at the time. And he was like, well, just come with me. And so I left the party, and I think it actually was a party I was hosting. So I just left the party for a couple of hours and went into the radio station with him. He showed me the ropes, and then at the end of the show, he was like, and we just had a couple of beers. We probably should have been doing that. FCC has no law over me now, but we had a couple of beers and had a great conversation and played some killer music. And at the end of it, he said, well, you sound pretty good. I actually leave for Baltimore in the morning. Why don't you just take over my show for the rest of the summer?
Wow,
and so
cool.
I did. And I mean, it was like you come into a dark building. It's summer. It was at University of Richmond, plugged in and tried to flip the switches until I figured it out. And from there, took it to the independent radio station and had my own show that I ran there for about 12, 13 years. So really rewarding. And I kind of read the writing on the wall when it came to the end of it. And when I was missing home more than I was looking forward to the show, I gave it up.
Well, I jumped on your website, and that first image that comes up in the record store, I love that piece.
Thanks.
You can really tell that music plays an important part of your past and your history.
Yeah, and my present. It's I kind of call my body of work that I do right now, it's kind of like the soundtrack to a road trip. I'll take a fragment of a song lyric and base a painting on it with whatever my connection is, take it out of context, change the meaning a little bit. So yeah, rock and roll, blues, country, music history is all really integral to me and my work, I'd say.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of how I started in music and, not necessarily my art show world, but how did you get started?
Well, when I was a little kid, I wouldn't say that I thought to myself, when I grow up, I want to be an artist. But I was the ham in the center of the room, soaking up all the attention. So, of course, theater turned out to be my avenue.
That's nice.
And high school and grade school, I was in all the plays, and then it just seemed natural to go on to college and to continue doing that. I never once thought to myself, and I never had my parents say to me, you really think this is a good idea to go into the arts like this? They just kind of allowed me to be me. And So I went on to the University of Northern Iowa, and I got my Bachelor of Arts in Theater, and I moved to the Twin Cities. And I was pursuing acting as my career. And like every good thespian, every good artist out there, the way we support ourselves is we work in the hospitality industry. So
that's right.
Did you ever work in the hospitality?
Of course I did. I did a lot of bartending and a lot of waiting tables. And I feel like there are two different kinds of people that I know anyway, and it's like hospitality industry people or construction people. It's like the introvert or the extrovert.
Yeah.
It's like it depends on what kind of person you are, but the good ones kind of cut their teeth on those two industries, I think.
For sure. Well, my first restaurant job was, no great experience. It wasn't like working in fine dining, which I ultimately ended up in. But I started in like a pie shop working at a Baker's Square in Burnsville, Minnesota. That's where I was meant to be because that's where I met Renee. So,
that's fantastic.
I like to say we fell in love over pie.
There's no better thing to fall in love with than pie. That's
Yeah.
great. How did you keep the 15 pounds off though when you're working in a bakery? That would have killed me.
Because I was chasing her, that's why. I thought she was pretty interesting, and she was an art student. And her friend Katie Palmer, a painter, said, to Renee, right about the time I met her, she said, "You should check out my brother's work. He's a professional glass blower. A lot of roadshow artists know him, Steve Palmer from Minnesota."
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so Renee went and saw him blow glass. He probably doesn't even remember this, but she went, she watched him, and that was when the fuse was lit. She was like, "Eureka, I have found my future." And she enrolled in glass blowing classes, shortly thereafter. So, I was doing my thing. I was, doing the auditioning thing, and she was doing her glass blowing classes thing. And she's coming home with these wobbly, thick little shot glasses from her first pieces. Mind you, that's no diss on her, because every glass blower who starts has these wobbly shot glasses.
Oh, yeah. It's a requirement.
Yeah, right. And she was so enthused and so excited by it that it was contagious. So I was following her around everywhere she went, and eventually I followed her right into the glass studio, and I started blowing glass with her. And it was this real strong kind of pull for me, because I had thought my life was going to go in one direction, and here it's kind of like swaying off into a different way. But I just kind of kept with it, and I was falling in love with glass and falling in love with her, and that's kind of where our partnership in glass started. And through our 20s, we blew glass together. We took classes at the university in glass blowing and got married and had our first kid. But it was on our honeymoon to Murano that we really, it kind of changed our lives.
Oh, man, I can imagine. I've seen the glass blowing there. That's pretty inspirational.
Well, so, yeah, we think we're going there because we love glass and we see the glass blowers, and that's what we're into. But we had kind of one of those finding your roots moments, like if you're on PBS, we were taking our flight over there. And we get to the airport, and we were in Chicago. And the lady who took my passport had this accent I didn't recognize, but she saw my last name and started giving me a hard time as if she knew me. And I'm like, "Do you know my relatives? Do you know my relatives back in Iowa? How do we know me?" She says, "Oh, I know all you Sigworths. My brother, my brother-in-law, and my nephew, they all work at the Sigworth glass factory in Hergesville, Switzerland."
No kidding.
And I'm like, "Sigworth?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Sigworth, like my name is spelled." And she's like, yeah, Sigworth Glass Factory. So that was back before we had cell phones, and we scribbled our telephone number down on a little piece of paper, and we said, here, call us, please. Call us back when we get back from our honeymoon, call collect, and tell us what you know. So that was the first little bit that we got about learning about this factory, thinking, well, the Smiths as a common name and the Sigworths must be glass blowers. Well, it turned out that I was a direct descendant from these glass blowers.
That's incredible.
It was the European trade for the family surname Sigworth. And we were able to trace back my great-great-grandfather from 1850 coming here from the Black Forest. And he was the last glass blower before Renee brought it all back to the Sigworth family line, so I really credit her to bringing glassblowing back to the Sigworths.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I love that.
It's one of those stories where this is not an easy life we do.
No,
and
absolutely.
And sometimes you just need something like that when times get tough to kind of look back on and say, okay, I really am on the right path. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA. I got to just stick with it. I got to keep moving forward, even though it's like, obstacles are right in front of you.
That's amazing. Growing up, I was surrounded by art shows. My parents were collectors and are collectors.
Oh.
They still, they obviously have not been to a show in a year. None of us have, but they have an incredible collection of American craft. And wood carvings and hand-blown glass and some porcelain. They have Georgia mountain pottery that they eat off of every day. So I was surrounded by American craft.
Nice.
I'm a liberal guy, but I was raised by a couple of Republicans. I was raised that we could sit down and have a conversation about anything. We could avoid things if we wanted, but you could go right after them, and they raised us to be whoever we wanted to be, surrounded by the arts. My sister's always been a writer. I've always been into art, whether it was, just scribbling pictures of Winnie the Pooh and Tigger, taking that and then going. I mean, they encouraged me when I was in school. I did always want to go into the arts, but what they encouraged me, like, well, how about, kind of nudged me in the direction of, say, the arts where you could potentially get a job. And so I went into graphic arts, trained as an illustrator, and so I got technical training there at Virginia Commonwealth University, but always surrounded by art shows. My ex-wife did art shows ever since she was little, kind of taught me the ropes too, doing that early on. We shared a body of work for a number of years that peaked and valleyed and finally swung me into what I do now. And it's been a good run. I love doing what I do. I think you're talking about theater and radio. It's like we kind of have this perfect balance of extrovert. We want to get out there and talk to the people versus introvert, be in the studio, leave me alone. I don't want to, I don't want to be talked to for like a couple of weeks and then we're like, nobody's told me I was great in a while. I better get out on the road and stroke my ego.
I remember a theater professor of mine used to like to tell the story about a dinner between Dustin Hoffman and Laurence Olivier. Dustin Hoffman asked Olivier, why do we artists do what we do? And Olivier stands up and leans in real close and gets in Dustin's face and says, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me.
That's perfect. I mean, and I got my start too in theater. I did theater all through high school. It saved my life. That's where I found my people. Just going down to, my dad worked at a all-girls prep school. And so they had a brother school that I got to go to for pretty significant discount. So I was the fake rich kid. Grew up there and always was kind of the artsy guy and also just wanted to kind of get away from the boys' prep school and would go up to the girls' side and found my way into the theater. I could hear them in there practicing something and went in there and checked it out while I was waiting for my dad to get off of work. And that's how I got the bug.
Cool. So were you in plays? Did you do any shows?
Yep. I did. I was in a lot of plays and did a lot of backstage scene building and things like that. We put on, we had a pretty good theater, and probably our big thing, like our senior play was Noises Off, if you know that show.
Yeah, I do.
And we did built the set on a turntable and turned that thing around, and it's a show within a show, so you get to see the backstage and everything that I have done in my life. I feel like I use, whether it's the working with tools that they taught me there in the theater, doing scene building, or working in a frame shop. After that, I did that after college for a while, and doing the graphic art stuff. I prepare any of my paintings I do. I use the skills I used I was an art director for a little while, assistant art director at a magazine. And I use those to kind of compose my images before I even started painting or drawing. So
I agree. Everything from the past has found its way into the present and the future. I mean, when I designed our booth, I built it myself, and I designed it as if I was building a set. And how it went together is a direct replica of how they would teach us how to build portable stages and panels together.
Flats,
for
right?
the stage.
You know
Flats.
what they call them, flats?
Muslin and painted muslin and framed wood. I feel like when I put our booth together and arrange our work, I'm using like a kind of stage design kind of aesthetic with placing the three-dimensional pieces as if I was, trying to direct the eye to a certain place. So yeah, I've used all those bits and pieces throughout my career and all the different aspects of my job.
That's amazing. It's interesting too. We're kind of recording our first podcast, but we have already logged some of our interviews, and some of the things that you're talking about remind me about some of the people that we've talked to that are getting ready to come up. I just talked to Stephen King yesterday. I found it fascinating. He has a background in theater as well. He has a master's in direction, in directing plays.
That's amazing. I mean, we think of him as producing one of the best art shows in the country, and just to hear all about the background that brought him to that point is just fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And it doesn't surprise me, to think about directing and directing arts and directing people. And I don't know, the amount of care that people have for him, and the fact that he still has the same volunteers year after year speaks volumes about that show. Mm-hmm. Looks like we're going to be able to get back to work, just to give you a hint of that.
That is so great. He's working so hard.
The whole team is, and it was really nice of him to give me an hour to talk about shows and show directors and how he got started and how he is planning on putting this festival together. Des Moines was one of the last festivals to cancel the June thing. I think Cherry Creek had fallen way before that, Old Town, Lakefront, they'd all postponed or canceled. And then you've got Des Moines, and we were all sitting there wondering, and we get a little bit of the behind the scenes for that and why it took so long. He wanted to get us back to work in June. Last year, it just wasn't possible. I'm betting on Stephen King this year that we're going to be able to get back to work.
I have faith in him. Well, coming up next, we have your interview with David Oleski with his report from the road. Here it is.
The Independent Artist Podcast welcomes David Oleski. David was born in Boston, educated at Maryland Institute College of Art, and resides in Westchester, PA, near the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, PA. He may have been your booth neighbor, or you may have seen him at many fine arts festivals around the country, exhibiting his impressionist paintings. His newest collection of work represents an ongoing artistic evolution shaped and distilled by the observation of light and color. So that's the bio that I cherry picked off your website, but I did want to invite you on the podcast because it looks like from Facebook and Instagram, you've actually been out there working a little bit and seen some real live art shows.
Yes, I have been out there on the front line. And I mean, my wife said, do we want to be taking this risk? And I said, I have to know I'm doing the best I can. I can't just, roll over and play dead. I mean, I don't want to get sick. I don't want to, I don't believe I'm taking unnecessary risk, but you're absolutely right. Yes, I have been out there and, after a brief hiatus, did get started doing shows again.
Right. And I mean, it's not like you're a COVID denier. You're worried like the rest of us. It's how's it been?
Well, the first show I did after the big break, everybody's wearing masks, and I'm realizing that you're playing poker and you're missing one of your tells. You can't see their mouth. Right. And so you're trying to negotiate just with eyes. And like blind people will make the most of their other senses so that, you wind up just, really putting a lot of emphasis on body language and eye contact.
That's hard, man. I had not even thought about that. I help my wife sell jewelry sometimes, and I have a hard time just looking down, with people looking down and not in my eyes because they're looking at the jewels down in the case. And I'm like, look at me. I can't tell whether this is real or not, So I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it.
But the shows have all been, doing the right thing, spreading booths out, requiring masks, just reminding everybody that there's other things at stake here. And even the hotels have been, we've never felt unsafe and overly exposed. Once in a while, we'll see, crowds like in restaurants, and it's easy enough to avoid that. But in general, getting a lot of food, and we're very familiar with sitting in the hotel room and staring at each other and eating as opposed to going out. But other than that, I can't say a whole lot is that different.
Okay. Other than the fact that you can't see people's mouths and they're looking down, are people being compliant with mask wearing and the things that the shows ask people to do?
Even in Florida, they are being compliant. I mean, some places they won't wear a mask until they come into your booth, and then they'll wear a mask. A lot of people are adamant about not crowding two parties into a booth, which is one of the requests the shows would make of their exhibitors. And and that's, everybody's watching themselves, and it makes it much easier to do the show.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable yourself getting out there working again?
Absolutely. I mean, it's, once we got used to wearing masks and putting them on, whenever you're around other people, it's business as usual. I think, if anything, people are hungry to be out. They are buying artwork. They are realizing they're going to live through this, and they're still going to be staring at their walls. So, the shows are good. It's not like people are afraid to spend money.
That's great to hear. That was another one of my big questions. You work mostly large scale. So do you work large because of the market or your own personal preference, or how does that work for you?
It's probably both. I do enjoy working large, but I'm very aware that you separate yourself from most of the competition when you go above a certain size.
Right.
That, if somebody wants a backdrop for their Zoom conference, which is it's a new thing this year, they're going to want a larger piece of artwork to be on the entire wall behind them when they're doing video conference from home.
I had not even thought about that, but maybe that opens us up to a new market. I work fairly large myself, but I call it the Aaron Heckenberg model. We're set up for big numbers and big zeros.
That's right. I mean, with great risk comes great reward. And, and I haven't changed what I do as far as, what I paid to sell. And I'm finding, the customers haven't changed either.
Right. Yeah, I find myself personally, I create what I'm comfortable creating. And within that window of what I'm comfortable creating is where people like to buy. So sometimes I'll focus on that, and sometimes I'll get weird. But that's just how we set up our own businesses, I guess. Hey, where have you been? Like, what shows have you done?
I was in Highland Park for the big show in late August there, the Port Clinton show. And then I was in Alexandria, Old Town area in September, and then I was in Stamford, Connecticut for a one-day event. And that was right in the very, in the fall when they first started relaxing some standards, and shows were realizing this isn't getting any better. We might as well deal with it. And since then, it actually got a lot worse as far as the numbers and so on. And I've been doing my shows in Florida. I was in Bonita Springs and Jupiter and Key West. And I think that's about it. My schedule has really opened up through the spring. A lot of shows have canceled. My next event is just an at-home open studio in May, and I don't have official shows on the books until June.
Okay. Yeah. For some reason, there's a big jump for me too. Did you specifically go after those larger promoter shows, knowing that they would probably have a higher likelihood of taking place than some of the single event shows?
I was mostly doing shows that were still running. The Alexandria show I managed to get into at the last minute because my schedule opened up because of another cancellation. And I'm pretty much taking any event that is in a proven demographic that is still up and running.
Okay.
And I even, knowing how many shows canceled here in the Northeast in April and May, I was tempted to go back to Florida, but we'd already done 2 trips down there and kind can only handle so much beautiful sunny weather.
and so much Highway 95, I guess.
That's right.
So I guess with the big promoters, though, what I've kind of been saying about like Howard Allen and Amy Amder is that those guys have more to lose maybe than even we do. They have a really specific reason to get back to doing shows. It's like it is their livelihood. It's not just a one-shot event. They've got things scheduled all the way through the entire year.
Well, the Port Clinton show, they officially canceled it and then relaunched a much smaller event that they could control the numbers. They had it fenced in. It was in a different venue. So they were able to regulate attendance and keep the total attendance with exhibitors down. Other shows are not any smaller, but they are regulating entrance, at least with a police tape. It's whether or not it's being enforced, at least the effort is being implied, which I think a lot of jurisdictions would just like to see you implying that control, whether or not you're wrapping the show in a steel gate.
Right.
So a lot of events that are continuing are events that can do some sort of a boundary and an entrance gate.
Okay. And do you feel like that cuts down on the buyers or it just cuts down on the riffraff?
It cuts down on the riffraff. You're not getting, people that are just out for a walk. And some of these shows, in particular, the Port Clinton show, because of the line to get in, that people had to make an appointment using Eventbrite, it definitely thinned out the audience to just the more critical buyers.
Gotcha. Are you finding that it's easier to set up appointments that way? I do a lot of my business on, those large works, kind of the people are interested, but they kind of want to come in and get out and maybe see you in their house.
Well, I've always made those options available. I regularly tell people, even on the mailings that I'll send out before I do a show, I'll say, while I'm in town, I could just come to your house. And I always, explain, my wife and I will wear masks, we'll maintain proper, social distancing protocol and show you the work in your home. So that offer is always there anyway, regardless of, if they can come to the show, if even when they come to the show, I always offer to bring work to their house.
Right.
I call it, to them, I call it a home show. To myself, I call it a home invasion. I'm going to force them to buy something.
Oh, man. I always joke with my wife. I'm like, just let me in the door. Just let me in the door. There's no way I'm not leaving Art behind.
That's right. That's right.
It's interesting, too. Like, I had one home appointment myself and had driven up to Park City to do a gallery drop and set up an appointment while I was there. And the sale was so quick. And she was like, yep, I like it. Basically, get out of my house, you unclean heathen. Like, yeah, you're wearing a mask, but can I just pay you with Venmo while you're in your truck? I'm like, yeah, absolutely you can, however it works. So
yeah, in some ways it has gotten easier because of that. People do cut the contact down and the decisions are made, because they're used to making decisions at the grocery store. Just get it. Just, whatever it is, just grab it. Let's just get out of here. I feel dirty already.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's almost the same thing when they're buying artwork.
Are they giving us more room like these festivals? Do the shows look different themselves?
You're spread out from the neighboring booth, but a lot of shows you wouldn't necessarily see the difference. They ask you can display on those side walls, but don't block those spaces. So in general, the shows don't feel that different. The show I did in Stamford, there was probably 20 feet between booths, and it was almost just like an empty street. It was just happened to be a beautiful day, so you didn't notice it so much. But in general, 10 feet between booths is not, it doesn't feel like an incredible amount of space, and that is overkill already.
Okay, well, I wanted to check in with you. You're going to be on our first podcast, and I wanted to check in with you as kind of our voice from the road, because you're kind of the great hope right now. I can see you working, and I think that's what we all really want to do.
Well, I'm also, the administrator of certain events. Of course, the Rittenhouse Square show and events that I run and help organize on my own, and I'm watching what the limitations are of certain size events, certain kinds of access to the public. Certain things cannot happen. Other things, if you take those few precautions of, wrapping the show in a police tape and having an entryway and having some unofficial monitor for the numbers of the events. I think I'm going to be able to run my show that I run in June. And they said it totally hinges on what the governor's office says. And the governor just raised the mass gathering restrictions. So it looks like, the show must go on.
Okay. So tell the audience, I know what show you're talking about, but tell the audience which show you're talking about that you run.
Oh, the Amagansett Fine Arts Festival in Amagansett. It's just outside of East Hampton, in the legendary Hamptons, where the rich and shameless are parading themselves on the streets.
Rich and shameless is what we go after, my friend.
Yes, it is.
Hey, you mentioned Rittenhouse, and I know Rittenhouse. Did they push back or have to cancel this spring?
They've gone virtual, as they say, as so many of these shows have been doing. Instead of staging an in-person event, they're going virtual, which I understand their logic behind not going dark.
Sure.
And they are offering opportunities for the artists to get exposure. But the bottom line, nothing compares to being right there in front of the audience on the street.
Yeah, that's hard. And it's a hard place for shows to be, too, because I know a lot of sponsors insist that there be something. They've already allocated money to the show, and it's like they can't just disappear for the year. I don't know if that's the case with Rittenhouse or not, but I know that is the case with some. It's like we have to maintain a presence. And so we have to be present for their presence, I guess.
Yeah. And, and the great scourge that everybody's talking about now is Eventity, a whole new platform for selling, which is now even becoming a platform for applying to shows. It's it's something that's been created by a bunch of programmers that it doesn't seem to really have the artist in mind. It more just has the need for the events in mind, using the artists. I've already been involved with 2 different shows that have used the Eventity platform, and I think it's another, it feels like Zap for sales.
Right.
We'll see. I think as more and more shows start being able to continue, I can't see that something like this would have legs.
I can't either, but that's not, I do see how it works for some kind of events, but with our art show industry, it has seemed to me like it's hard for art shows to even get a following online. Depends on how active they are, but even some of the bigger shows only have, your Cherry Creeks, your Des Moines, they may only have 100 likes or interactions per post. People want to see us. They want to get up close. They want to, they may check in and see who's going to be at the show, but they want to see us in person. They want to see the art. They want to check in and make sure that we are agreeable people that they want to have hanging on their walls. So it's hard to do that virtually.
But I do think that one thing that's, a good thing that's coming from all this is when artists are doing these live presentations, they're learning some of the skills they should be developing on their own anyway. They should be learning how to talk to a camera, learning how to light themselves, learning how to talk about their work, and use the technology to get on a social media platforms. So in effect, these virtual events, it's like a crash course in, social media for a lot of artists that I think they really needed.
I agree with you. You have a nice presence online, and I've enjoyed some of your videos, starting with even the colors of Thailand and going further. I've enjoyed your videos. You've started doing kind of an online almost podcast. I saw your interview with Julia Gilmore, another one of my favorite painters. She's great. So is that something you're going to continue doing?
Oh yeah, I love doing video, and I love doing some of the impromptu interviews like this on Instagram with a couple of my artist friends. And when the quarantine first started, we were doing a drink and a cigar happy hour with a bunch of artists. We'd set up a Zoom conference, and all of us would be on our little windows, some outside, some sitting in the dark. And we all got really comfortable with it. So doing these Instagram interviews, it's just like shooting the breeze and talking shop and catching up.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
That's the way the podcast has been so far. It's been, I've talked to Stephen King, Marjolaine Vanderhart, and it's so easy to talk to your friends just doing this. And it's nice to learn how to talk to people again, I guess, after we've been in our studios and homes for over a year.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you one more thing. You and your lovely wife, Amporn, are kind of one of those art show couples. You know, you rarely see one without the other. It's like Bonnie and Steve Harmston or the Radkes. Something about having your spouse around just seems to make you more likable. And, or that's the way I find, not necessarily you. But it is the case. But does she share your outlook on traveling? Is she been worried and kind of scared to go with you? Is she traveling too?
She loves, using that spray alcohol sanitizer, just even as a nervous habit, just like I feel dirty, and she would just spray her hands while we're driving. And I said, you didn't even touch anything. But, aside from that, she loves traveling, and we've done shows in places that we've just wanted to go, like Key West, Florida. I'd never been to the Florida Keys, and we figured it's got to be fun. Let's do this. And, it's great traveling with somebody that, is as excited about the destination as you are. And, like I said, she initially had her doubts about it, but she's realizing if we're careful, we have nothing to worry about.
Hey, like I said, I wanted to have you on here to give us kind of a road report, kind of a litmus test for current shows that are happening. Anything else you'd like us to know?
No, I think we hit just about everything. I mean, of course, we could go on all day and I could crack open a beer and it would eventually start getting dark, but we'll have to do that another time.
It's a date, my friend. I hope so. Let's plan it on the road. What's your next show?
Next show, I stay home for the Chester County Studio Tour on the third weekend of May, where all of the artists of Chester County, Pennsylvania will be opening their studios to the public. And we'll have a bound book that gives a guided tour of all of these locations. And it's a weekend that can be spent just enjoying Chester County, Pennsylvania. So I am actually looking forward to that.
Nice. That sounds great. You can check out David's schedule online at davidoleski.com. He also has a YouTube channel under David Oleski as well. Anywhere else we'd like to see you? What's your Instagram?
David Oleski of all things. And then Facebook is davidoleski.paintings. And Vimeo is David Oleski. And Twitter handle, I think, is David Oleski. So pretty much anytime you look for David Oleski, you will find me.
You have an original name. It's easy to find you. Yeah. Thank you again for being here, and thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Take care, Will.
All right. See you, David.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, Will, that was really interesting what you and David talked about.
It was really fun to talk to David. I knew that he'd been out working shows. I hadn't realized that he got back to work in August at Port Clinton. So that's a lot earlier than a lot of us. So he's been doing shows.
I thought Alexandria was the big launch for everybody. That surprised me too.
Yeah, and it is the big promoters. Like I was saying in the interview, the big promoters have as much to lose as we do, if not more. This is their livelihood, putting on these shows every weekend or almost every weekend or 25, 30 weekends out of the year.
You know what I found really interesting that I hadn't even thought about was when he said that when people are wearing their masks, that it took away the ability, like he talked about poker, and you couldn't tell what people were thinking because a mask is covering up their expressions. That was pretty amazing.
It is amazing. I've always said my big kryptonite in art sales was when a wife or a husband or a partner or something calls their significant other on the phone, and I can't talk to that person, and they're talking to them, and I feel completely cut off. This sounds like a whole new challenge.
Yeah, right. Totally. What do you have any other takeaways from the interview?
My other big takeaway, and it's only something he barely touched on, I've been having a really hard time being motivated in the studio. My last show was Gasparilla, so February of 2020. So it's been over a year since I've done a show, and I'm really just slogging through trying to get something done. It takes me much longer to do a painting. I can't even seem to varnish anything, and it's really hard to get back to work. So having those shows motivate you again was really inspirational. It makes me excited to be able to show again.
I had that exact same conversation this week. I was talking to my friend Oliver Schnorr, jeweler from
love
Naples.
Oliver.
Yeah. Well, he was saying him and Christiana got back on the road, shows in their backyard because they live in Naples. And same experience. He said that even he had good shows, he had bad shows, but even the bad shows made him want to get back to his studio and make more work. And he was worried that the industry was dead. And this was reminding him and letting me know the shows will be back. So just keep working.
That's fantastic news. And it's also great news to hear that he is actually back out there and working too, because he had just a heck of an accident with his hand.
That
be
was
an interesting
awful
conversation.
So, the flip side to the conversation that you had with David was what we're going to talk to an artist next week, Marjolijn Vanderhart from Canada. So instead of going out and back to shows, she worked her social media and her website, and she kept her business afloat from home. And she's going to tell us the program that she developed to how to do that. So she's going to share that whole program with us.
That's fantastic. I've always been really inspired by Marjolijn. She's always had a direction that she was taking her work and her business. And I've been a little aimless at times. And I find myself not able to do a lot of the things that she's able to do. And I found it to be anxiety-inducing to listen to her conversation with you, as well as incredibly inspiring. So I can't wait for that to be our next podcast.
She is laser focused on the data and analytics, and you're not going to want to miss it because, even if you adopt a couple of the things that she talks about, it's going to improve your business. And I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot from her.
Absolutely. Can't wait to hear it.
Well, we've talked about what a tough year this has been with the pandemic, and, not to keep dwelling on things that have been rough, but we really have to acknowledge the fact that, this community has taken a number of blows, and we've lost some dear friends this year, and it's just been rough.
Douglas, the hardest part for that whole thing, and we're getting ready to talk about some friends that we've lost, but the hardest thing about that has been that we don't have our community to help us get through. We can't go to the bar and toast Matt Estrada. We can't go and have a hug and talk about Scott Coleman. It's been really the hardest thing, and it makes me feel just emotional just thinking about it. I have not seen Matt since I was his next door neighbor at Dogwood a couple of years ago, and just what an incredible booth neighbor he was, and how funny he is, and meeting his whole crew of friends that came to see him. He was a beloved member of our community, and it's a major loss.
I never met him personally, but, like we see posts and whatnot on social media, and you kind of feel like somebody through that. And he always just seemed like somebody who had something funny to say or something uplifting, and I know that video that kind of circulated right before he had his accident, about him loving life. It was touching. It was ironic that was like his final words to the world.
It was touching, and it was very Matt. He went out just incredibly happy, and he had gotten himself into a place where he was really happy with life, and he had gone from being a delivery driver to doing arts festivals and becoming just a beloved member of this community. And speaking of that, going on to our friend Scott Coleman, who I don't know if I've ever met a sweeter man. He was just so kind and so generous and so loving to anybody that he talked to. So just another incredible hit to our community. He was the type of guy that when you talked to him, there was nobody else around. It didn't matter if you were at a busy festival. He just came in, and he felt like your hearts were just kind of connected. Not to be cheesy, it's just a wonderful man. He really just was a wonderful man.
That's so meaningful.
So Anyway, I can't wait to get back out on the road and to see some of my friends and celebrate some of these incredible humans that we lost and see everybody face to face again. But until then, we're just kind of doing this, and you get to hear our voices anyway, right, Douglas?
Yes, that's right. Well, let's just use this time, get inspired, get back to work, and get ready to all be together again in front of our collectors. And, let's let's just be strong.
Definitely.
Well, Will, we could talk right on through to the next podcast, but we should probably take a little break and start preparing for the next one. What do you say?
Let's do it. Next episode is going to be Marjolin Vanderhart, like Douglas said. You're not going to want to miss that conversation. It's a fascinating one.
All right, guys, take care. We'll see you around.
Thanks, Douglas. This podcast has been brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
And while you're at it, check out Will's website at willarmstrongart.com and my website at sigworthglass.com.
And remember to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.